Welcome back to another episode of All Dad Jazz. My name is Giovanni, your host. This is a podcast basically talking about the journey of fatherhood, what it takes to get here, and what it's like after. Whether it's one child, two, three, four, five, who knows? That's your preference, and I applaud you for it. In this episode, a very special episode, I'm going to go ahead and bring on a special guest of mine, a good friend, actually, spanning well over 2 decades now. I first met him in 2003 in middle school, definitely early teen stage. My goodness, I'm super anxious to see how my kids are when they're that age. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce everybody to my friend, Sal. What's going on, Sal?
Oh, it's nothing much. Wow, hard to believe. 2 decades already.
Two
What
decades.
was that, 7th grade?
I think it was eighth grade,
8th,
like the
yeah,
middle of eighth grade. Yes, yeah,
yeah.
Augs,
But
Antia for
still,
those yeah.
yeah, the Apaches, or they don't call them that anymore, do they? It's the
I
Warriors.
don't Probably. I'm surprised they still kept that. They're
Yeah,
being
exactly.
politically correct and all that good stuff, and
Not
reminisce
many
about
people can say they've known somebody for, 20 years. I mean, that's an honor in itself.
yeah, it is nicely put. Because I know we actually reconnected. I believe it's probably the middle of 2015. Right, I was still
Yep.
living in Korea. Obviously, I was actually in Seoul. And you just kind of reached out of the blue one of these, right? One of those days, and I was just like, "Hey,
Yeah.
it's Sal. What's going on?" And we just kind of just reconnected.
Yeah.
And when my family and I went home a year ago, uh, you and your now fiance, congrats, by the way. So if you guys were
Oh,
listening to
thank
last
you.
episode, exactly, this is the person I was giving a shout out to, both Sal and Susan, really good friends of ours, and they're recently engaged. And I couldn't be more excited for the both of them. So a lovely new chapter coming your way. So that's
Oh,
amazing.
thank you. Thank you. We're excited for it. We're excited to have you guys come over for it. I mean,
Oh, we'll be there. We will be there. Going back to our reconnecting, that it just amazes us, like, because at that time, you were a dad. You were a dad already.
mhm.
Or me, I was like
Yep.
this traveler, just didn't know where I was going to go the year after. Just going from contract to contract, and that's basically what I wanted to focus on primarily for this episode. We do have another experienced dad, a dad who's been a dad much longer than I have. So I would like to really hear his input and see kind of how his journey was becoming a dad and where he's at now. So let's jump into it. All right, Sal. So how long have you been a dad? For how many years?
Well, my little guy is going to turn 14 in March, so
Wow.
going on 13 and 3/4 years.
Wow. Wow. You are a dad of a teenager. That's what would you say? I know it's early stages. Would you say it's an easy transition
Um,
from the adolescent age?
I would say it's easy, yes, but more the difficult thing is the transition of knowing that, your little guy is not, so little anymore. He's making that
Right.
transition into self-dependence. He can take care of himself a little more. He doesn't need you as much.
Right.
Starting to acquire his own friends and his own routines, and little by little, you're not involved as much, and
Sure.
it takes a toll on you. That's the hard part. Raising him is easy. He's a great kid, but um, just watching him transition into his own routines, that's the hard part.
Sure. I can only imagine. Do you guys kind of set aside time? Maybe not like appointments or like son dad dates, but do you kind of set like, hey, this day is strictly just like for us, like we're gonna do something on this day? Do you kind of have like any kind of rhythm or pattern of that sort to stay
Oh,
connected?
sure. Oh,
Yeah,
sure. He just recently got into basketball now.
nice.
So every Tuesday we get together, and we go play at a park district. The first time I used to go by myself, but he got into it. I say, hey, why don't you come on by, watch us play? Because he'd always just watch little highlights on his phone and what have you. And I'm like, well, let's go watch real people play. Um,
Yeah.
so we went there one time, and one of the players there was like, "Hey, does he want to play?" Like, oh,
Sure.
he's only a teenager. And granted, dude, this is like 20s and 30-year-old men playing. I'm like, no, he's just a teenager. He just wants to watch. Well, if he wants to play, and I think he overheard him, and he's like, yeah, I'll
Yeah.
play.
Oh.
And since then, he's been going ever since, and he's like more excited than me to go.
Wow. No, that's great. I think it's important, especially at that age. You want to start finding your own hobbies, your own things. Because I know at 13 years old, like I loved sports. I was into like track. I was into volleyball, basketball, you name it. I played every single sport. I wouldn't say I was a jock, but I definitely loved being out more.
Mhm.
At the same time, I also like playing my video games here and there, but I really love the outdoors.
Sure.
You at
Who
13,
doesn't?
if I remember, you were quite the opposite, weren't you? Did you get out
Oh, I
much?
was quite the homebody. Oh my goodness. I had everything you did. It was like the opposite. I was a
Yeah,
homebody, and occasionally I'd do sports. You were the sports guy. I'd occasionally do and occasionally do video games. But yeah,
yeah,
I had a very discreet circle of friends, and we
yeah,
just played on video games all day,
yeah. Nothing
which is
wrong with
why I
that at the
can't
same
really
time,
fault
yeah.
him.
No, I do. I'm a big sucker. I like the old retro games. But why don't we actually go ahead and kind of rewind now that we're talking about the present a little bit? Let's back up even further, starting from the first time you actually found out that you were going to be a dad, right?
Mhm.
I know in my previous episodes, I talked about my initial reaction, which I wish I could have taken back because it wasn't a very pleasant reaction. How did you feel? What was the first thought?
I'd probably about the same. It wasn't the
Yeah,
most pleasant of reactions.
sure.
But obviously, given the circumstances, I was not married. I had a stigma on me that not being married and having a child, that something happened, you failing in life, you did something wrong and what have
Hmm.
you. So it wasn't too long after that those feelings start to subside, and you start feeling joy, like, wow, like, I'm actually bringing a life into this world, because from a
Hmm.
young age, I never thought I would ever have a child. I don't know.
Yeah,
Like we just said, I was kind of a closed door guy. Never really thought that I was kind of down on myself. I had the lowest self esteem. Didn't aesthetically take care of myself. I mean, it was one of those, like, it was a far fetched dream for me. So to hear that it
sure.
was finally happening, that was later on replaced by excitement, and worried. A lot going on. You have to really think long term, and that was one of the changing points. Is I never really thought long term in my life. It was always, I'm going to do this until I do this until I do that. But now
Hmm.
you have to think 18 years into the future.
That's actually a pretty good answer and well said. I'm like you again to kind of refresh everybody's memory. Like I just remember feeling just overwhelmed. We had just arrived in the States. So Young and I were only together. I think we were only engaged for less than a year. By the time we actually were married, she was already 6 months pregnant. I remember thinking to myself, like, I just wanted more time. Like, I was selfish. I just thought, I just got home. I wanted more time to travel. I wanted to do things, and I'm bringing a child to this world. And yet, I still felt like the child itself, who was about to have a child, and I just wasn't ready to grow up. To where I know someone was like super excited. I just remember thinking, like, I need support. I have to call my dad like right now. I need to tell him. I need to talk to him. I just need some advice. I got to get my thoughts straight. And but no, it's always good, having that kind of like support, having people to kind of talk you through things and let you know they know that they're there for you. I mean, not that it was like the worst news in the world, but when all was said and done, and I was actually able to finally come out and surprise my parents, I remember just them just feeling super excited for the both of us. Something that's always going to be forever just burned in my memory. Just that was actually one of many few times I actually saw my dad cry, like my whole life. And it was just touching. I'm sure maybe your parents probably felt the same way. Is that right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean,
Hmm.
of course, you had to suck it up and make the phone call that nobody ever wants to make.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah.
their reaction was oddly quite the opposite of mine. It was one of those, what's the difference? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Where we're gonna Whether you were married or whether you're not, it's still a human life. Then we're gonna love because it's a family member. It's a part of you. So how can we get mad at it? So they just wanted to know more or less my plan, because I wasn't in the career I was in now. They want
Right.
to know my plan for life, and that's all.
Sure. What would you say that? the pregnancy, I know maybe not many men where I personally felt like I wasn't as involved in
Mhm.
my wife's pregnancy. Something that I'm constantly reminded every now and then, all these years later. Do you feel like you had an active role in your partner's pregnancy? Do you feel like you did
Um,
enough? Because I feel
well,
like as a man, we can only do so much, right? It's like we're not carrying it, we're not bringing it to term, we're not breastfeeding it. I just felt like, what could I do? Like I could only do so much. I could massage your feet if you want me to do that, but I just feel like I just never did enough. I don't know if yours was the same experience.
well, I definitely feel you on that. Definitely as a man, we definitely feel like we could always do more or we're doing
Hmm.
enough, but it's always I play a pretty active role, you know, what necessities, what do you need? Running out, getting the, you know, groceries, you know, preparing meals, just making sure you're comfortable,
Hmm.
driving doctor's appointments, the typical expecting dad things. As far as mental coaching, just hey, you got this, you know, it's part of life. You're doing something great, you know. But it was a smooth pregnancy. It was like I didn't really notice any difference.
That's good. Did you find yourself having to like frantically run through like Barnes and Noble trying to get books on how to prepare yourself to be a dad? Any kind of rule books of that sort?
No, oddly enough, all her family members would just shower us with those books in general. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah,
It was almost like the first month I got, you know, expecting dad expecting all those dad books, you know, and
yeah,
she got the female version of it. And from watching movies, you know, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie, was that Knocked Up with Seth
sure.
Rogen?
Seth Rogen.
There was a
Yeah,
part in the movie where she gets mad at him for not reading the baby books, and you know
yeah,
he's
yeah,
he's sitting there. You know, I didn't read the. You
yeah,
know.
yeah,
So
yeah.
the first thing I did was I was working at a currency exchange at the time, and I'd bring those books to work with me because I'm like, I'll be damned if I'm going to be the one that's
Yeah.
going to get yelled at for not reading the books.
Yeah. Got your whole highlighter there, your little notes, little stickers,
Mhm.
little post-its. That's
Yep.
hilarious. Yeah, you can only prep so much, and nobody
Yep.
or nothing really challenges you until again you are holding your newborn right then in your
Mhm.
hands. And again, as a first moment as a dad, like what was the first thing you did when you did hold your child? The very first thing in the
Well, I
hospital.
mean, like every dad, I mean, just the first sight, you cry. I mean,
Hmm.
it's probably one of the most joyous moments in the world. I mean, it I think it was your dad that said nothing else matters anymore,
Hmm. Yeah, he did.
and he's exactly right. I mean, the from the second, it's like time stood still, and there was no
Sure.
one else in the world except you and your newborn. I mean,
Hmm.
our child was premature by 6 weeks, so
Okay.
we weren't able to hold him right away, which made things extra difficult because
Oh,
in that moment, all you want to do is hold your child. But
sure.
we unfortunately got to see him. They did a little presentation and then whisked him away to the NICU.
Sure.
But tears of joy nonetheless. Time really stood still.
And did you get a chance to cut the umbilical cord? Did they allow you to do that?
No, it
Oh
was one of
no.
those. We got to
Oh, okay.
snatch and run.
Sure. Okay.
It's not that he was any distress, but it
Sure.
was one of those. He being 6 weeks, you know, lungs are the last thing to develop in
Sure.
a child. So I'm not sure if he was taking adequate breaths or he wasn't perfusing well enough. But they basically cut the cord, and my son was on CPAP for about a week after that in the NICU. So they kind of cut and ran.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Oh, I had no idea. I know when Gianna was born, it was during COVID, a lot of weird funky protocols. So it was kind of the same thing. Like even though luckily he was born healthy. But yeah, the minute they took him, she only got to spend maybe 5, 10 minutes with him, breastfeed a little bit, then they took him, put him in the incubator and took him away. And I thought, like, dear God, like that's my son. Where you go with my son? He's better off with
Yeah.
us rather than with you. And I remember just infuriated me like the entire time. Yeah, with Gianno, I cried. Sophie, I just stood there like just in disbelief. Like you said, that frozen moment in time, just now what? It was like the big thing,
Yeah.
like now what? Now I'm
Yeah.
responsible for two mouths. But yeah, I remember I just couldn't cry. I think I was just shocked. I didn't want to take any pictures. I didn't want to put social media. Like I just wanted to be there in that moment. I just
Mhm.
was just I couldn't believe it. I remember the first thing I did was she was laying on the little table. They had like that blinding light on her because they were trying to clean her or wash her. I remember just taking my finger, just saying, "Hey, daddy's here," and she just grasped it. I'm gonna get choked up thinking about it, but And she just held onto my finger, and I just thought like, wow, like I have a child, like I'm a daddy now. Like this is crazy. And I felt bad because I just kind of left so young behind. All like on the table, like, oh, help me here. Like I've just been in labor for 27 hours, but just that's again, you can't put it in any other way. Now, but Giano cried on the table. I was right at So Young's side. I was just like, hey, you're a warrior. You did it. You're amazing.
Yep.
She didn't have her drugs the second time, so it was all just natural. And
Oh,
damn warrior she was. Oh man. But I am actually pretty lucky. I actually got to choose both names for my daughter and son. Because obviously being Giovanni, I had to keep the Italian names going, as you can
yeah.
understand, being Salvatore.
Oh,
But
oh, of course.
I remember for like at least for Sophie, it just took like forever to come up with her name because I remember it's like, is it Sophia, Serafina, Angelina, anything I could come with, I could just end with the vowel, just anything, and then it just finally just clicked when I was at I believe it was a steak and shake. I was just eating one day. I was like, Sophina, that works. Sophina, that's the name. That's what I'm going to name my daughter. What
Mid-burger.
about you? Yeah, where did your son's name come from?
So we have an ongoing tradition where we name our the Italians, that is, that we name our child after the first. So basically, hard to explain, but you name it after the gender of what parent it is. So that's why, there's the ongoing joke why there's so many Franks, Tonys, and Vinces
Sure.
in Italian
Yeah.
culture. It's because when your child is born, you typically name him after the parent counterpart. We start with the father side, and then we go to the mother side. So, for instance, my dad's name is Francesco.
Okay.
So, being as though it's my firstborn son, he would be Francesco first. And then next child, if it's another male, then the woman would name it after her dad.
Mm.
Um, and then if we have a third child and it's a woman, I would go back to naming it after father's mom, and then so on and so forth. So the more
Ah.
genders you have, then it just becomes whatever you want to name it.
Sure. Reminds me of that movie from Big Great Greek Wedding. Nick, 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 Nick,
Hmm.
Nick, Nick, Nicky, Nick, Nick. Yeah. I need to
And
Diana
I
Nick.
am
Yeah. And
Gus.
I am Gus.
I actually thought about you off topic because I remember us talking about Greek Wedding, and they're actually making a third one or made a third one, I
Are they?
believe.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
I'm
mean,
like, oh man, I wonder if Gio's seen it or
they're
is
adorable.
excited about this
Loved
yet.
them. The first one was just a
Yeah,
mega hit. The second one was all right, but it's just nice. I love the
yeah,
connections from like the first film, so it just made sense with me. I think
yeah.
it's so wonderful. I didn't know that about the Italian heritage and the names. That's really cool. That makes
Yeah.
sense. A lot
It's more
easier than
like
ours.
a
Yeah.
it's more of an antique thing where like for like more people who've come from there, they're still
Hmm.
doing it nowadays. Italian families are, putting them as the middle name.
Sure.
Um, so that's kind of gone to the wayside. The kind of starting, new culture, new heritage. But
Hmm.
I just my dad was kind of a very dominant figure in my life, so I kind of wanted to honor his life by naming his first grandchild after him.
Right. That's nice. I mean, don't get me wrong, I would have loved a Giovanni Jr. I would, but only I can be Giovanni. Like
Right.
that's just the way it is. Like it's just me. I'm the Giovanni. Like I could imagine. I love my son Giano. I love it. I love the name Giano. It's so cute.
It
And
is.
then obviously our children's middle names are the Korean names. So you have Leah and Leo. Easy, super easy. Now let's fast forward a little bit. So now we have kids. They're getting a little bit older. Our lives have changed dramatically. Nothing matters
Mm.
anymore. Anything that was just petty before is just now gone out the window. How did you, as a dad, a new dad, impact your work life balance? Right? How were you able to manage all that? Like you said, I'm sure financial, support was the first thing that came to your mind, as did mine. What were you able to do to kind of manage to make sure that you had time for your family when you were home from work?
Well, so at the time, I was working second shift at my dad's restaurant,
Hmm.
which from 3 to 11 every day is kind of the peak hours of any sort of baby activity. So initially, it kind of hurt because I was not able to see him awake as much. Because I mean, he'd be
Hmm.
awake during over the night for feedings, but you never
Sure.
get to see your child during the day with the activity level. That kind of hit a little hard. Financially wise, though, it definitely. made you toe the line. It gave you it pushed all those petty expenses to the wayside and made you focus on a more I as far as like food needs to come first. He comes first and then us. Make sure you toe the line.
Mhm. Yeah, I get it. Because for us, it was a real struggle. Because
Mhm.
I stupidly just quit my job. Because I thought, all right, we're gonna go. Because again, I was still this traveling mode. So I quit my job. We went to Korea for a couple months. That way she could see my wife's side of the family. And then when I came back, I wasn't able to find work right away. So then we had to go on food stamps, and I was just kind of just like alone. I mean, nothing wrong with food stamps. So I'm lucky it's
No,
there.
no.
But I just remember like, God, like I really effed up big time. And again, So Young reminds me of this once in a blue moon. And I you just learn from it. But those are kind of things that just kind of just need to happen. You just kind of just deal with it. You have to deal with those struggles. Because I know now that I'm prepping to return to the States this coming May, like I have a plan.
Mhm.
I get there, as you know, as all my other listeners know, I do plan on becoming a firefighter. Just like Mr. Sal here, this is the guy who kind of got me, pushed me towards that direction, and I think it's a great career. I think it's a great move for all of us. And I just basically have a plan. Once I get back, get my house, get the car, get set up, have them come over, and then we just kind of move on from there. I just finally just need that peace of mind because again, it's not just gonna be me going with a fiance anymore. It's me, my wife, and two kids. So I gotta grow up a little bit, mature, which I think I have. You would think after two kids, all these years later. So let's just see if I can just put that to work and apply it to my life strategies. I know
I will
we talked
say
about.
that is the
Oh, go
greatest
ahead.
career in the
Yeah.
world. It'll teach you, and that's
Side note.
something.
Yeah.
Not just saying because I've been doing it for 5 years, but it definitely teaches you life lessons even outside of work. Being a fireman, I assume that you're the same, where you'd have to become paramedic and medically trained as well, right?
I would like to do that. That's actually a goal
Yeah.
of mine. Yes.
And that will definitely transpire into your personal life. Anytime somebody's sick, you have a better understanding of what works, what doesn't work. Whenever somebody gets hurt, you have a better understanding of how to fix it. You'll start seeing certain medicines that you normally take for cold and flu, like, oh, that really doesn't work at all. It
Mm,
definitely transpires into your personal life. You're really going to enjoy it.
I hope so, because even now, like, I don't know if I told you this, we recently discovered, oh, I did tell you that the Giano has asthma, and
Yeah.
finding out was like the worst thing. It just scared the crap out of me. Here I am at school trying to teach some 4-year-old class, and I get to text my wife saying, we're rushing him to the hospital. He can't breathe, and right away, like, just my heart just sinks to the pit of my stomach. Like, what's going on? Do I have to be here? Do I gotta take my bag and run out the door? Like, anytime you hear anything about your kids, just ER, you don't know what to think. But
Hmm.
luckily, it wasn't too severe. They just said basically your son has asthma. He's got to be put on this little, what do you call it, little inhalers. The next time
Hmm.
he has a fever, which he has the past 3 days, he's prone to getting these attacks. And so that's why I'm kind of leaning towards a career in the medical field, EMT. So I know I'm knowledgeable about this,
Yeah.
and I can prevent any other kids from not getting hurt, but I can assist when necessary. That's the goal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's
It
selfless, it's very selfless. I would love to, like you said, it's not even like a job. It's something that's for lack of better words, it's just heroic, it's brave, it's noble. That's what it is.
yeah.
It's just doing the right thing.
It'll eventually, I mean, if there's any firemen listening, it'll eventually lead to, it doesn't even feel like work. You go there, hang out with your friends for 24 hours. You're off 2 whole days because I work a 24, 48-hour shift. And it
Hmm.
just feels like you're going there hanging out with friends. You play pranks on each other. You eat dinner. Sleep at the station. It
Hmm.
becomes your second family away from your family. Um, but as far as this, it definitely does erase that stigma. I know if you're like me as a child growing up, or even now, going to an ER or a doctor's office, even you guys, those little worries in your stomach, that little fluttering in your chest,
Hmm.
definitely transporting patients to the hospital on a daily basis. It kind of erases that because you start to develop an understanding, better relationship with your doctors, nurses, and it kind of erases that stigma. Now it's like going into the like walking into a store when you go to
Sure.
the ER.
Yeah. Hmm. It's funny, right? You don't really think about that.
Mm.
Ah, that's a really nice perspective.
I'm still terrified of the dentist, though.
Oh God, me too. I think I'm overdue. They keep sending me text messages to come in. I'm like, I don't know yet. Let me just floss a little bit more. I'll get back to
Yeah.
you.
Why do you want
Let's
to
move
see me?
on.
I brush 3 times a day.
That's true, right? That was brutal the last trip. So I was like, oh my God, I never want to experience this pain again. So I'm always making sure to at least brush 3 times a day now. Let's actually move into parenting philosophy. I think that'd be a
Yeah.
nice little topic. What values would you say or principles do you prioritize in your approach to parenting? Like, can you share a
Um,
lesson or a piece of advice you've learned on your journey as a dad?
yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, you touched on this in your first podcast. They can give you every handbook in the world, but nobody can tell you how to raise your child.
Hmm.
That is an experience in and of itself. And when I was growing up, I had a very structured, parenting. I was going to do this. I was told to do that. It was pretty much like I wasn't able to make mistakes because I was reminded how not to do things, if that makes any sense. So
Hmm.
I kind of want my child now to learn before he does it. I want him to make the mistakes, so he can learn from them. I was always taught, growing up, school, failure is your best teacher. Um, so if you don't fail, you can't learn from anything. We could always tell you don't do this, and you'll always wonder why. What happens if it does happen? But until you truly see what happens when you fail, then you can learn from it. We've all failed. As far as my son, obviously I don't let him do anything dangerous that'll result in him hurting himself. But little trivial things, I'll let him make the mistakes, and if it's worth giving them, a talking to, then I will. If not, then I kind of just let them be free spirited and just coach him along the way.
Hmm.
I guess that's a better word for it. Is you're not so much parent, quote unquote, as far as you're a life coach.
Hmm.
You're prepping him for your job to become a dad, to become a successful parent, uh, business person, what have you. Whatever he chooses, steer him on the right path.
With Sophie, she's just still finding her own groove. I mean, this girl, I mean, she loves to watch her Mickey Mouse. But what I've noticed is that she's got like a really good memory. Like she absorbs information like really easily, starts like memorizing. I think she gets that for me because I wouldn't say I have a photographic memory, but it's a pretty long lasting. I've got the memory of an elephant. I don't forget things. And so in that sense, I'm kind of hoping she's taken after me. But with having a daughter, I feel like I'm softer, obviously, towards her. Growing up, I feel like it was a tough household. I probably can relate to you. Everything was always just no, well disciplined, do as you're told. I get the spanking every now and then.
Oh yeah,
And I
oh
was
yeah,
told that I would never spank my kids, and I'm guilty of it. Obviously, I do have a temper, especially when these kids are going through like, these like temper tantrums, because I'm just an angry one as well. So I always just fight fire with fire, rather than
yep.
being the civilized adult and trying to talk through things. I usually react first and then think after, and that gets me in trouble with both the wife and the kids. And so those are the things I'm constantly just need to work on myself with as far as my parenting techniques. And I read this really good book that my dad actually gave me for Christmas called The Growth Mindset. How there's two different mindsets, the fixed and the growth one, right? A fixed mindset, you're just kind of stuck in your ways. But with the growth, you're seeing things in like nine different perspectives. And from analyzing each one, it's just a different angle, a different solution with each one if you approach it that way. And I thought that's a really good tool for not only just, business relationships, but parenting and marriage as well. So I'm really trying to apply that.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, we can only do so much. And what would you say is maybe some practical tips or maybe dad hacks you'd like to share
Mm.
with other dads, like any favorite books, podcasts, or maybe resources that have helped you navigate fatherhood apart from,
Well,
yeah.
here's the thing. The easiest thing to remember is a child is basically a smaller version of you. So
Hmm.
any interests, any foods, any whatever that you had growing up, he is going to have those interests. Maybe slightly modernized because obviously time change, interests change, but just find that one thing that you have in common and just run with it. Um,
Yeah.
Big wise, and favorite TV show, favorite activity, and just run with it. nobody, like I said, nobody gives you a handbook on how to raise a child from start to finish, but let him kind of guide you, kind
Mhm.
of work off of each other. So for me, it's easy for him. We find a common interest. Sometimes we don't even feel like parent and son. We feel like, you know, friend and best friend because we just
Hmm.
like the same things and we just roll
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah.
Um, there are times where you have to be the parent, and I've
Yeah. Put
reminded
the
him
foot
countless
down.
times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
like,
My dad always says, he's like, "We're not friends. I'm your father.
yep.
Never call me your friend." I was like, "Yes, sir."
Which always
Yeah.
confuses them because there's times
Yeah.
where I'm giving him that talking to, and I'm like, "Buddy, you're like my best friend," and he's like, "But you said I wasn't your
Yeah.
friend." I'm like,
Let me
no,
finish. All right.
I did say that. That's not what I meant.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I constantly remind him, and before I punish him, I'll always remind him, I'll be, I can be your best friend or I can be your worst enemy. Don't
Yeah.
make me be the second one.
Yeah.
And he kind of then understands, like, oh boy, I did something wrong.
Yeah.
I'm a
Never have to.
perfectionist with him, unfortunately.
Yeah. Sometimes I know I have too much of a control issue. I always want things my way, and I just have to really just stop doing that. I really just gotta let Sophie do her own thing because I felt like with her growing up, I kind of just gave her too much anxiety, and all that's just on me. But again, a work in progress. I'm always that building with all the scaffolds around me, right? We all have our flaws, but we all just kind of figure it out along the way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Closing thoughts. I feel like you kind of just touched base on everything. I think from everything you've gave your spiel, you clearly are a fine example of what a good dad, a great dad should
Oh,
be.
hey,
And I
thank
hope that
you.
anybody who does, absolutely, who listens to this can kind of take your life advice. Again, whether you're expecting dad for the first time, it really is a wonderful moment. Really cherish it. I know I addressed in a previous episode how about, we only have on average about 18 summers with our kids, and how maybe and even half of them, like your son, how he's starting to find friends, spending more time away from home, and we kind of just losing these little tiny windows we have with our children, and to really cherish every moment that we have with them. But we'll go ahead and conclude today's episode here. Sal, it was a pleasure having you on today's episode. I thank you for your
Oh, thanks
time.
for having me. It
Oh,
was my dream to
absolutely.
be on one of your pods since you were still on the first one. I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm terrible. I have a terrible podcast voice. My
Oh,
son is
nonsense.
actually, funny thing is, he's actually subscribed to you. We were listening to you on a drive to go get lunch one day because I was
Nice.
telling Susan, and it was your very first episode, and he was in the back seat listening. He's like, oh, "Do you care if I listen to him? He's got such a good podcast voice." I'm like, "Please
That's
subscribe away."
appreciate the love. I appreciate the love. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Be sure to head over to my link tree where you can access all my socials, which include my Facebook, YouTube, as well as my Instagram account. I'll catch you next week on a brand new episode of All That Jazz. Have a good night.